one thing I just want to say is like, this is not our job, right? Like we're
Mhm.
filmmakers. We want to make films about, all of American stories. Like we're not data analysts. I mean, this is the job. I mean, ITVS, it's great that it's laborious, but that is the job of these institutions to understand, where they stand. I think it's not that hard also to hire an independent person. There's lots of studies that have been done by Annenberg Center or UCLA, Ralph Bunche Center about diversity and ethnicity in Hollywood. The Stacy Smith study on women in media that is always cited everywhere. And I don't think it's that hard to get an independent researcher to figure this stuff out, right? It's we are here to hold this institution accountable, and ask for this stuff, and then it's an exercise to go find the top leadership at these three stations, but this is not how we want to spend the rest of our time. There are people within our group who like this kind of stuff, but personally, like, that's not my idea of fun, even though it has to be done. So.
Right, right. Yeah, and I think too that also speaks again to the will to want to do this work. I mean, it gets very frustrating to hear, like, again, these cyclical conversations about we have to do better, how shall we do better, the mea culpas and so on. And then it's sort of like the same thing that keeps repeating. One of the things that I find like really frustrating, for example, is just over the course of like the work that, we've been doing, is often that the solutions keep are just replicated. It's like the same thing. And there tends to be a focus, for example, on creating like a program to support emerging filmmakers. Now that is, every industry needs to cultivate talent. So that is not the issue, but it's almost a little bit of like an off ramp because that doesn't address the provocation that Grace made in the first place. What Grace was talking about has nothing to do with a lack of trained BIPOC filmmakers. You know what I'm saying? So that is the kind of thing that, while it's not our job to do that the labor that Grace is talking about, but like they have to demonstrate that they are serious about, again, systemic change, not a one-off program. Because Grace and I have been, have benefited from and have been part of like the PBS training pipeline, and they've been like really actually great programs. But the fact that these sort of barriers to entry and access and support across the board, whether we're talking about production or marketing, whatever, persists, is a problem. So they have the work that has to be done has to reflect a new sort of approach and understand and appreciation of the issue of what we're talking about. That again, it's not like one thing here, one thing there, and we're done. It's really systemic. It's why does like your process not reflect the priorities, for example? Why is it like we're talking about public television, for example, and we're talking about someone that takes up a lot of space, and what are the implications for that? Because I think someone had pointed out, like, now that there's been a Muhammad Ali series by Ken Burns, who's going to get to do that? Who's going to get to tell that story? There was an opportunity for that to be co-directed with a Black filmmaker who really wants to tell Muhammad Ali's story. That has passed, and it was something that was shared with Ken Burns and his family, essentially, were the authors of that. So what are the implications for that? So like what we need to see is something that reflects a real deep dive and systemic approach to what we're talking about, and not just like, here's several $1 million over whatever for this program or that program. It has to be a little bit more than that.
Richard, do you have thoughts?
Yeah, just briefly. I mean, this is great, and I really appreciate this, guys. I just want to mention that, Grace, I think something you said really resonated with me when I was listening to you guys. I was like, yeah, this shouldn't really be your job, that you guys should be doing other things that you're really good at. And it makes me sad, actually, because I'm like, this is awesome you guys are doing. But the funny thing is, this is actually my job as an academic. And I have, one thing I was thinking, like, we can easily download all these PBS transcripts or actual the videos, and we can use machine learning algorithms to tell you, what proportion of time does Ken Burns control, right? Like the sort of like white male voice, like that's something that you should not figure out how to do, but like this is something that I do professionally, as part of like what I do. And there's a bunch of people like me.